Hello book lovers, and welcome to or welcome back to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. So today I thought I would go through 10 books that are some of my all-time favorites. This will just give you kind of a better idea of what I like to read, and you can kind of get a better idea if this is a channel that you want to follow. I hope that some of my favorites are some of yours as well. If you see any of your favorites, of course, let me know down in the comments. And even if you don't see your favorite, let me know what it is. So I will jump right into it because we have 10 books and I do not want this to take too long. So the first book is going to be the last book in a trilogy. The whole trilogy is a good story. The writer is incredibly talented, but this was the only one that I gave 5 stars, and I think will probably stick with me for a long time. And that is Jade Legacy. She is chunky, but well worth the read. You can see the other 2 books down here. So this is part of the Green Bone saga. The first book is called Jade City. And pretty much we follow a family that is part of a clan on a small island that is warring with another clan, and eventually it expands beyond that. We have powers from outside countries that are interfering or assisting. It is a highly political read. It is an urban fantasy. It is East Asian inspired. Fonda is a East Asian female author who has a black belt apparently, so you can definitely see that in the fight scenes. The story is incredibly well written, very complex, but I felt for the majority I could understand everything that was going on. I felt very comfortable with how the clans were set up. I had a little bit more trouble when it came to the other countries and their involvement with the clans or even with each other, but other than that, characters were at times unlikable. These aren't the most likable characters. We're following, like I said, the family. So we have some brothers, some cousins, sisters, and we just watched them over the years. So this spans, I mean, I think maybe like 20 years or so, maybe even more. So this series definitely covers a lot of time, and it is a very in-depth about not just physical war, but kind of war on a more political front, if not like more a commerce front as well. So it's a really great read. This book I like particularly because it made me cry twice. If a book can make me sob the way the Song of Achilles made me sob, this did it twice. So I honestly had to give it a 5-star. There was no other option. So highly recommend this series. Alright, so the next book is a lighter read. It's a romance, and that is The Love Hypothesis. This is a well-known book. I'm sure that if you're part of the book community, you know the story. So we follow 2 characters. Let me check their names. Olive and Adam. And so they are in a school setting. So this takes place, I think she's an undergrad, and he is a professor. And it has the fake dating trope in it, also Grumpy Sunshine. I believe this is based off of, I think they call it Raylo fan fiction, which is either based off of Star Wars or Star Trek. I have to admit I'm not part of either of those fandoms, so I'm not quite sure who these people are supposed to represent. So I mean, in a way that seems like it was a good thing, because I think some people were like, I couldn't stop picturing him as so-and-so. And I was like, I don't know who that is, so that doesn't bother me. But what I really loved, and kind of put this over the top and made it one of my all-time favorites, was the fact that our character Olive seems to be demisexual, which is something that I identify as, and it was kind of that first time where I read it in a book and I really connected to this character because of it, and so that just made this a really important read for me, and I highly suggest that you guys read it as well. It's super sweet. She's a fun, quirky character. And there's also a really great toucher and I'll kill you scene, and we all love to see that. So the next book I believe is YA. It definitely doesn't read as YA. The writing is incredibly beautiful and mature, and that is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is the first and only book that I've written. If only I had written this. The only one that I've read by this author, but I'm definitely looking forward to reading some of her other books because I really enjoyed the writing. I loved the strong female characters that are in here. So we have 3 points of view from 3 different young women, and they are all very strong in their own way, and it was wonderful to see throughout the story the people around them start to realize how incredible these women were, that they're not just to be married off, that they're not just to be used, and they're not just servants, that they are incredibly intelligent, and that they're very powerful, and I just enjoyed every moment of that. I finished this and I honestly wanted to reread it instantly. This was the second book I had read this year. And I was like, you're going to be on my top 10, you know, you're probably going to be on my top 5. Just incredible, especially great for winter time. It is kind of like a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. I would say it almost slightly has Howl's Moving Castle vibes as well for one of the relationships, because one of the princes is possessed by like a fire demon, so I would say that it also has those vibes as well, and we all love Howl's Moving Castle, at least I do. So yeah, very, very good story, highly recommend. All right, so the next book is going to be the second in a duology. It's written by NK Jemisin and it's called The Shadowed Sun. The first one is called The Killing Moon, and that story was great as well. I just like this one a little bit better. They are part of the same series, but this one takes place like 10 or so years after and follows pretty much completely different characters. But I really enjoyed NK Jemisin's writing. I feel like her worlds are really complex but really easy to understand, so I feel like she's a good place to kind of start out if you're looking to get into fantasy, because I'm pretty new to high fantasy, so this is one of the first series that I read, and I know a lot of people say that Brandon Sanderson is good for that. I'm just not ready to get into that, you know, giant list of books. So NK Jemisin is where I decided to start, and I think it worked out really well for me. This book does have a lot of trigger warnings, especially around child abuse and sexual assault, so it's a really harrowing story. I think this book made me cry as well, because it just follows, I mean, I don't know how much I can tell you about it without spoiling the first book, even though they're pretty similar, or pretty different, but pretty much we are following a couple characters who are trying to figure out why people are dying while they're sleeping. There's something that's creeping into people's dreams, and it's killing them. So they're trying to hunt down what that is. And so we get multiple point of views of the people that are looking for it, including from people that do know what is causing it, and they find themselves very much trapped in a situation. So also trigger warnings for abusive relationships and incest. But highly recommend, even despite all that terrible stuff. NK Jemisin stories are very beautiful. I know a lot of people didn't like it because it is highly political, and sometimes it seems like there's not that much going on. It doesn't even seem like it's really character driven. So I think it seems like this is just a story that you just have to vibe with, and that was me. I really vibed with both of the stories, and I really look forward to reading more of her books. Alright, so the next book is a book that I literally just finished this week. Like, I read it while I had COVID. I had a terrible headache, my sinuses were killing me, but I was still having a great time, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. So I have read all her books now, and rated them all 5 stars. Beach reads, People We Meet on Vacation, I love them all, but this one is my favorite. Every single book that she has written, it just gets better. She's just going off. She's going off to outer space. She's getting better and better with every book she wrote. This book I liked the best because it was the hottest. This book was pretty sexy compared to the other ones, which seem relatively mellow in comparison. But this character, Charlie, instantly you could tell that he wanted our main character, and I'm forgetting her name, Nora, from the moment that they meet here in the small town. Pretty much her sister drags her to the small town where one of her authors, because she's an agent, had set one of her books. So she was like, hey, let's go to the small town, have the small town experience that people always have in books. And she's like, I don't have time, but sure, why not? And then Charlie is there, an editor who she had met a couple years beforehand, and they hadn't really hit it off. But I can tell, like, instantly their banter over the phone, they were really comfortable with each other. And then when they met, just the way that it was described, the way he looked at her, the way he talked to her, just had you going like, whoo, whoo, you know. And there was a few almost moments where they were like, they were right at the edge and they just didn't jump over, and so you're like, come on, you know. So you're definitely rooting for them. As with all Emily Henry books, the stories that revolve around the romance are really strong. We get her and her sister's relationship. It seems a little bit strained, so you can see her dealing with that. We also see her dealing with the death of her mother, which had happened a while ago, but she's still working through that. And then we see Charlie as well, dealing with his father, who is having some health issues. So an overall well-rounded book, highly recommend, as I do all these books. Alright, so next we have a book that's part of a trilogy. I recommend the whole trilogy. You can see it right there. Yep, and you can see that I have book 2 because book 2 is my favorite. And this is the Captive Prince series by C.S. Bakat. This is also, I think, one of the first queer books I read. I got it from the library. I'm trying to think how I found it. I probably had recently read Song of Achilles, and was like, oh, I need more of that queerness. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And probably typed it into the search engine at the library and it popped up. And I was like, that sounds interesting. And these are the only books that I have ever read in like one day. Obviously not all 3 of them in one day, but like each book took only one day to read. And one of them is like a little over 400 pages, which I never do because I'm not that fast of a reader. But this series is so addictive. We follow Damon, who is the king of Achilles, or he was the prince and is supposed to be the king after his father died, but his brother excuse me, has him shipped off as a slave to, I almost said Verenia, but I think that's TJ Klune's world. Vier. We don't know where we are. He's sent to Vier. Anyway, so he's sent there as a slave, you know, to be the slave of the Prince Laurent. The first book is a little bit darker. I mean, they all have some dark scenes, but that one is the one where he spends most time as a slave, and there is some sexual assault and some whipping involved in that story. I just want you to know that any sort of relationship that starts between the two, sorry, my COVID throat, doesn't really occur until after it is very clear that Damon is no longer seen as a slave. And then, you know, the relationship really takes off from there. So there's no like slave master relationship. That's not at all what's going on here. I know some people have problems because they think that's what's happening. I would say that's not the vibe that I got at all. But there is some issues with specifically sex slavery in that book. Book 2 is probably my favorite because we go from the darker topics of book 1 and we get like a lot more adventure, travel, and humor in book 2. I think C.S. Bakat really has a great sense of humor which really comes to life in this book, and that's why it sticks out to me. We really see the two characters start to become closer. One of them is definitely trying not to feel anything, but the other one is just, he's doing too much. It's hard to ignore. So it's just a really great time. There are some really great sex scenes in this series. The first one isn't until the end of book 2, and then there's one more in book 3. So there isn't a lot. So if you don't really like those, you know, it's not like it's overwhelming or anything, which in my case is unfortunate, but if you don't like it, that's a good thing. But they are really well written. So they're still some of my favorite romantic scenes to this day. So highly recommend any books by her. I know she has a new young adult series that's coming out. I read the first book, and you can tell she does a lot of research before she writes her books. I'm pretty sure she said that she researched for this book for like 10 years before she wrote it. So hopefully it doesn't take another 10 years before book 2 is out. But yeah, you can definitely see in the quality of her world building that she puts a lot of thought and effort into it. All right, next we have another romance. So this is the third book in a companion series, so you don't have to read the other two before you read it. And that is Act Your Age, Eve Brown, which is part of the Brown Sister trilogies. I've read all of them and they were all decent. This is the only one I felt like purchasing for myself because it was my favorite. This follows Eve, obviously, and she is someone who jumps from job to job a lot. She jumps from job to job a lot, and her parents are like, okay, we're gonna cut you off until you figure out what you want to do, because you can't just be doing all these random jobs and not making any money. It's time you have some responsibility for your life decisions. So she kind of runs off or drives off, and she's angry about it, and she's driving and driving and ends up at this town where she sees that a bed and breakfast owner is looking for a new chef. So she was like, well, I need a new job, so I'm gonna go ahead and apply. The interview does not go well. She ends up hitting the owner with her car at some point, but because he's injured, his friend is like, you need the help, there's literally no one else, so let's do this. So he reluctantly takes her on. This does have autism rep in it. Both characters have autism, and it's done really well. I mean, obviously I'm not own voices, but I have heard from many people that it's done really well, and I felt very comfortable reading it. So I would definitely suggest this if you're looking for autism rep in a romance. It is like a Grump and Sunshine. It is technically enemies to lovers because she hit him with his car, so he obviously doesn't like her, but it is really sweet and pretty steamy. I didn't like love the steamy scenes. I think with Talia Hibbert, I just don't connect with them as well as I do with others, but I think as far as out of all the 3 books, this one was probably the best for me. So very cute. Once again, highly recommend. All right, and then we have another very predictable one that's probably on a lot of people's lists. and that is The Song of Achilles. I'm actually currently working on a reread. I will probably be done with it by the time that I post this video. This is the, I don't know if I can make it look pretty. The 10-year anniversary, so it's just, you know, really pretty. Fortunately not signed, but still gorgeous. So obviously this is one of the first queer books that I ever read, and it really just set me down a path of loving books with more diversity in them. This story is obviously heartbreaking. You know, on my reread, you know, I was enjoying the beginning so much, but there comes a part, you know, where you start to feel dread. Like if you know the ending, you're reading this with a lot of dread. You're kind of like, oh gosh, things are going downhill from this point, you know. Their relationship is described so beautifully. Madeline Miller has absolutely stunning writing, and seeing it from the point of view of Patroclus, you know, Patroclus, we're gonna say his name is. Seeing this from the point of view of Patroclus, I'm sorry if I say his name wrong, was very interesting because at the end of the day, I think Achilles is not a very likable character, but seeing it from the point of view of someone who loves him so deeply makes you like him, even though deep down you're like, I hate you. So just so glad that she wrote this story. Game changer, no joke. Thank you, Madeline Miller, for your service. Please write more books. I appreciate that you take a lot of time and that they turn out so incredible, but it's also very hard to be sitting here waiting for you. And for my second to last book, we have Ace of Spades by Faridah, Abike-Iyimide. I apologize if I completely butchered that name. I probably should have practiced it before I sat down here. So this is a book that's described as Ace of Spades meets Gossip Girl, which I think is the perfect description for this book. That is 100% what this story is. It is a young adult. We are following these two characters here, and they go to a private high school, and they are the only two Black students that are there. It's their high school year. So far things have been going fine. You know, he's a bit more quiet. She's very popular. She wants to be the top of the class. She wants to be class president, things like that. He's also a scholarship student, and she's wealthy. So we get both of their points of view as they are dealing with these text messages that are being sent out by someone anonymous, revealing all these terrible things about them, just like Gossip Girl, and how they kind of band together to figure out who is doing this so that they can obviously put a stop to it, because they're like, okay, this is going to affect our future. You know, we want to go to college, we want to be successful, and we're not going to be able to do that if these people are saying that we, I don't know, like murdered someone. So we do get some queer rep in here. He is gay, and she, I think, is bi. She's dating a guy, but she's also interested in a girl, so I don't know if she's a lesbian just starting to figure it out or if she's bisexual, but either way we do get queer rep in this book. It's very high intensity. I did not want to put this book down, and the ending I think was a really great ending. So I'm gonna just let you see the cover because I think this cover is gorgeous. Alright, so the last book is a TJ Klune book. I am a big fan of TJ Klune, so of course I need to have a book by him. I chose the first book that I ever read from him. I am planning on rereading it this year, so it has been a few years since I read it, so I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but it's been on my favorites list, so I gotta put it on here, and that is Into This River I Drown. Luckily I got a new cover because I didn't really like the first one. No offense to the redheaded boy that was on there. Yeah, so this follows Benji. Totally forgot that that was his name. As you can tell, I have not read this in a long time. His name is Benji. He lives in a small town. His father had passed away. I don't know how long ago it had been, but his father had passed away and he is still dealing with grief. As we know, TJ Klune writes a lot about grief. You can see it in his Under the Whispering Door book, and his that's Fonda, his Green Creek series as well. And he does it really well. And that includes this book, which actually ended up winning an award. I don't know if it says here. Oh, yep. 2014 Lambda Literary, is that how you say that? Lambda Literary Award winner for Best Gay Romance. Oh wow. Yeah, so this actually won an award. So pretty much we're following this character. It's a romance between him and his guardian angel who falls to Earth to be closer to him. There's kind of this mystery going around about, I think maybe his father's death not being 100% an accident. So the two of them are trying to figure that out. We have small town support. So this is a small town, but they are supportive. So they're not homophobic. So it's always good to see. And yeah, pretty much we get to see the two of them fall in love and just kind of figure out what's going on and helping Benji through the immense amount of grief that he is feeling towards his father because they were very close. So it's very beautiful and I look forward to rereading it, and I hope that I love it as much as I did the first time. Alright guys, so those are 10 of my favorite books. I don't know if I can say that they're the top 10. I mean, I have other books that I love very much, and things are constantly fluctuating as well. Those were just 10 books that I happen to have in my room. I mean, off the top of my head, I could also think that Dark Matter definitely should be on this list. It's an absolutely stunning book, but I don't own it. I borrowed it from my sister. And then also, like, I Wish You All the Best as a young adult book featuring a non-binary character that is also one of my all-time favorites. I actually have a beautiful picture of the two characters from there that I'll go ahead and show right here. Very stunning, and I believe that was from Peaches, obviously, I think is her name. I'll go ahead and link her Instagram, or their Instagram. I'm not sure if they're a female artist, down below if you want to check out any of their work, because it's really beautiful. I also have a Song of Achilles print from her, or them. I should say them because I'm not 100% sure on their gender, which I'll feature here as well. Yeah, so I'm sorry if this video was a little long. I seem to just start babbling about books. I'll have to work on that a little bit more, maybe put out some like bullet points of what I want to talk to you about each book, so I'm not just like, all right, now I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna say this. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll probably do a video as well about some of the books that I've DNF'd and did not like. Of course, I don't want to talk too negatively about books, but you can tell a lot about a reader based off the books that they don't like, and of course I want you guys to get to know me a little bit better. So I will probably film that and post that soon as well. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. As I said earlier, put down below if any of these books were on your favorites list, or of course let me know what some of your favorite books are of all time, and I'll see if I know them or if I need to add them to my TBR. Alright guys, have a great day. Bye.